Hello and welcome to a special YouTube edition of Capital Action, ASA and NAIFA's Government Relations e-newsletter. I am John Russell, Director of Government Relations with the American Society of Appraisers, and I'm joined today by Peter Barash, the Government Relations Consultant for both ASA and NAIFA, and by a man many NAIFA members will know by face alone, Mr. Chuck Blau, the current President of NAIFA. Good to be sitting here with you both this late morning, early afternoon.
Good to see you, John.
Good to be here, John and Chuck. Look forward to this.
Yeah, so really the reason we wanted to get together and do something a little different, we're actually about 2 years now into what started out as an informal conversation. I remember it with 2 presidents ago, Wayne the Bear Mayo at the conference with ASA out in Las Vegas. We kind of all got together out there and thought it'd be a good idea for our organizations to work together and obviously work through Peter on some government relations issues. And now that we're a couple of years down the road from that first conversation, thought we'd sit down, talk about some of the things that we've worked on, some of our successes, and some of the things yet to come down the pipe. And so really, there's no other place to start, I think, than with the Dodd-Frank Act, because that was really kind of the impetus for formalizing how we work together on government relations issues.
No, absolutely, and that's a good place to begin. The first thing, perhaps, we ought to say, and I think we all understand it, is that the appraisal profession is one of the most heavily regulated professions in the United States. For real estate appraisers, of course, that includes, most importantly perhaps, the fact that you've got to be state certified or state licensed. But for other disciplines, and certainly outside of state requirements for real estate appraisers, the federal government seems to be in the business of spending time considering and issuing rules and regulations as to how appraisers ought to conduct their practices. And so one of the things that we start out with here in this discussion is that we need to pay attention to what is going on at the federal government level and at the state government level that affects the financial and professional well-being of the memberships. And that keeps us pretty busy, both on the real estate side and in the case of ASA, it also affects our other disciplines as well, business, valuation, and personal property. Dodd-Frank is a good place to begin because Dodd-Frank turned the appraisers' world upside down, mostly in a good way. It changed the way federal agencies have to regulate appraisers, residential real estate appraisers primarily, and it greatly influenced how appraisers do their business in the private sector as well as those who use appraisal services. One of the big items with respect to Dodd-Frank that we're waiting on in terms of final regulations is the provision that requires users of appraisal services to pay the appraisers customary and reasonable fees. As we all know, painfully, when the Federal Reserve Board issued interim regulations on that, they created a very unfortunate loophole which allowed lenders and AMCs to include the fees that AMCs had been paying appraisers to calculate what's customary and reasonable, when in fact the intent of Congress was to exclude AMC fees, the fees that AMCs were paying appraisers, from the calculations of what appraisers would normally receive in the marketplace. Fortunately, the Federal Reserve Authority to promulgate the customary and reasonable fee final regulation has now been transferred to the new Consumer Financial Protection Board. And there is some indication that they may look at this differently when they issue their final regulations. And ASA and NAIFA have written to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, have made numerous phone calls to them, urging them to eliminate this loophole that was created by the Federal Reserve Board, which fundamentally allows AMCs to pay appraisers any fees they want to, rather than what appraisers would normally have received prior to AMCs really taking over control of the marketplace. So we're thinking that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is likely to reach a decision on that sometime later this year. And we're going to have to wait and see what they do. If they end up blessing what the Federal Reserve has done, then our only choice at that point is either to live with it or to go back to Congress and say you need to make even clearer what you already made clear in Dodd-Frank and prevent AMCs from using what they paid appraisers historically to determine what appraisers actually received in the private marketplace, when in the old days they were almost always hired directly by mortgage lenders.
Well, the thing that always struck me about this customary and reasonable fee, if it was in any other profession, it was a lawyer or a baseball player, and they said, okay, we're going to get paid what the typical guy gets. It would never work, and it really shows that I think that the AMCs, it has nothing to do about quality. They're not trying to get someone good. They're just trying to pay you, the average person, whether you're good or not, the average fee. And I think that's part of the problem with all the regulations, that, the quality has nothing to do with anything. I don't know what your thought on that.
No, I think that's certainly been the experiences that our members have told us, and your members have told us, that it's really tantamount to a race to the bottom. The AMCs are in business to make as much money as they can, and for them, that means paying the appraisers as little as they can. And there's no doubt that this has really resulted, for many residential real estate appraisers, in a significant reduction in the fees that historically they've been able to command. What's very interesting, Chuck, with respect to what you just said, is that when John and I go up to the Hill and complain about what the Federal Reserve did, occasionally someone will say to us, well, why should Congress dictate what appraisers should be paid? Shouldn't just the private marketplace determine that? And the answer that we have, and we think it's pretty convincing, is that appraisers never would have been in this fix to begin with if the government hadn't decided to break the connection between mortgage brokers. Basically what they did, the government tried to do in doing something that good, which was to prevent users of appraisal services from pressuring appraisers, which is a good thing. But what they did in a rather clumsy way through the HVCC was to basically create a virtual monopoly for AMCs, because whereas previously many residential appraisers were hired by mortgage brokers, a lot of the business came from them. After the HVCC, that relationship was entirely severed. So there's no competition now for who hires the appraiser. It's all basically in the hands of the AMCs. So in response to the question of why should the government dictate what appraisers should or should not be paid, the answer is government created this problem, and therefore government should have a role in solving the problem.